CBS Sports Radio's podcast. I'm James Hale, and my very first guest is a guy that everybody knows, and a guy that's one of the legendary Sooners, one of the legendary Oklahomans in sports, Mr. Cale Gundy.
James, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Cale. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing awesome. I'm doing really good. It's a pleasure to be here.
After what went down, that's what everybody always asks me. How's Cale doing? Like you're going to fall off the face of the earth or something. I'm always going, do you guys really know Cale?
Yeah,
he's going to fall on his land on his feet.
Not me. Cale's doing great. And I tell you, it's been, I've had a great fall and had a chance to be around a lot of people and kind of catch back up. And I'm in a really good place right now. I'm very content and happy with what's going on.
Cale, let's start talking about, on Monday we lost Mike Leach.
Yeah.
And that's a very sad thing. I've cried a number of tears. I know you have too. You were on that first staff with Mike, but just your thoughts on Mike Leach.
Very unique, one of a kind. It's been really, I've really enjoyed the last few days of being on social media and seeing all the interviews and the stories and so many of them I know already, and I had the opportunity to be a part of, there's nothing surprises you. There's not an interview that he gives or has topics that he talks about that surprises you, and so many people that I've talked to that we were friends with Mike, everybody has said you would just love to have one more conversation with him. Mm-hmm. You would give anything to do that.
There's no doubt. And you're on that first staff, and I'll ask you later how you got involved with that. But that staff, to me, has so many personalities.
Yeah.
And it's one of the greatest staffs ever in college football history. You guys won a natty in your second year, and you guys won a ton of games. But talk about that year with Mike on this staff with Mangino and Mike Stoops and Brent Venables and Steve Spurrier Jr. and those guys.
Well, it was a combination of a lot of different, a lot of different areas of coaching trees where people come from. You had a few of them that come from Kansas State and Bill Snyder, which, arguably one of the greatest turnarounds in all of college football.
Absolutely.
And a lot of hard work, a lot of long hours. A lot of seriousness in everything that they do. Then Bob leaves Kansas State and goes to Florida. He works with Steve Spurrier, and we're a place where I can remember Bob telling us that he would go in a staff meeting at 8:30 and Coach Spurrier would sit at the front of the table and said, "All right, boys, we got anything we want to talk about today?" And nobody says anything, and he'd look over at Bob, and Bob being the defense coordinator, he says, "All right, we got practice today. Are you putting anything in new that we need to know offensively?" Or, Bob would say a couple things, or he'd say no, and then Steve Spurrier, the head coach, would say, "Well, we're not doing anything any different. It's 8:35. We're teeing off at 9:30. Let's be back here at 1 o'clock." So then you got that side of, kind of Bob's mindset, and Bob kind of gravitated, even though he had a lot of his ways and beliefs of Bill Snyder. He liked the fun side of things with Steve Spurrier. And then you bring in Mike Leach, who's just kind of out there. And then when you get to combine Mike Leach in a room with Mark Mangino, it's just kind of it's a thunderstorm, just the big old thundercloud that's just building in there. And it took us, a week, 2 weeks, but everybody kind of figured out what was going to happen and who was going to run the show, and it was Mike Leach.
During the season, I've always heard this story. You can substantiate it. Maybe it wasn't true. Because, Mike Leach is running that offense. Look at you split. You guys are getting plays in. You guys are going fast as you can go. And, of course, the big thing as you guys were going along was, are they going too fast for the defense? Yeah. Similar as we've got running to now. Is it true that one meeting, Mark Mangino, that Mike Stoops and Brent and those guys are saying, asking Mike Leach, hey, you've got to run the ball more. You've got to at least run some clock. And then Mark Mangino said, hey, I've got a couple of plays. Is this true that when he said, there's a couple of plays, and Mike Leach said, well, you can put them in if you want to, but I'm not going to call them? And then then you guys had to hold. I don't know how you're going to hold Bear back, but you actually held him back as he's trying to chase Leach around the room. Is that true or not?
It's so I'm gonna give you the facts
Please.
of it.
Oh, please do.
You're kind of beating around a little bit here and there. It
Okay.
is true.
Okay.
It was our first offensive staff meeting, so none of the defensive guys were in there.
Okay.
This is our very first offensive staff meeting, and Mike is sitting at the end of the table here. Coach Mangino is sitting at the end of the table down there. You got Jonathan Hayes is kind of in the middle. Steve Spurrier is here. I'm sitting over there. And, Mike kind of talks a little bit about kind of philosophy, what we're going to do, this and that. And then Bear, Coach Mangino, said, well, hold on a second here. I need to talk about the run game. And that's where it started. And then Mike said, no, you don't need to talk about the run game. He goes, we're not going to run the football. We're going to throw the football here. And, Bear starts to stand up, and he's like, no, we're not. We're going to do this. And Mike's like, just like you said, he said, no, you can practice that all you want. You can teach your linemen that all you want, but they're going to pass protect. Well, about that time, Bear gets up and starts coming around the table, and Steve Spurrier sitting here, and Bear kind of leans across. He kind of leans across Spurrier, and Mike's sitting back here. He's got his legs crossed, and he's got a cup of coffee, and he never moved one bit. And he's kind of leaning on Spurrier on this table here, and then Big Jonathan Hayes gets up, and then I kind of get up. I'm sitting over there like going, what in the heck is going on here, And Mike said, he goes, you can practice that all you want, but we ain't going to do it. We're going to throw the football. And so we calm him down. Somebody comes in the door. I can't remember who it was. Mike and Bear end up Coach Mangino, going into Coach Stoops' office and talking about it. And they got it settled, and when they came back, we were going to throw the football. So we ain't going to run.
That's the very first practice.
The very first offensive meeting we ever had. That was it. We're trying to talk for a little philosophy.
I wonder what
get
Coach
to know
Stoops
one
is
another.
thinking a little bit. He's
Well,
got, the first meeting I've got guys trying to rip each other's throats out.
I'm 26 years old. I'm like, what in the hell's going on here? But I think Bob wanting to run the ball some, and probably had told Coach Mangino in the recruiting process, trying to hire him down here, that hey, we're going to do some of these things, this and that. But at the end of the day, when they came back, Mike Leach was in charge, and Mike Leach was going to do it his way.
That offense that he put in has revolutionized college football. I mean, people are running it all across the country.
Yeah.
It took Canes 3 or 4 years to catch up to what Oklahoma was doing. Even when he left, and you guys put more of the run game in 2000 with Mark, people were still trying to catch up with what Oklahoma was doing.
Yeah, and the run game helps it. And Mike, if you watched his teams here in the last several years, they run the ball, and they don't run it like they don't have as many different philosophies in the run game, but they run it enough nowadays. And I've always, people are like, you need to run the ball some, and give the defense time to get a breather on the sidelines. And James, my comment to that is, if you're on the defensive side, if you'll stop them after 3 plays, you get to go sit down over there.
Right.
If you're giving up these 8, 10, 12 play drives, that's your problem. You have a choice as a defense to go out there and go 3 up, 3 down, and go over there and sit down on the bench and get all the rest in the world. And while this offense goes all the way down the field and scores, you're resting. So I've got kind of a conflict with that when people want to talk about that.
Well, you guys had such a great year. What do you remember about 2000, going into that 2000 year? It's the last national championship OU's won. What do you remember about that year?
I just remember the belief of our players, our staff we were all very young. Steve Spurrier Jr. and myself were the youngest. I was 26 and Junior was 27. Brent and Mike and Jonathan Hayes and Coach Mangino and Bob. Gosh, I see those pictures nowadays. We were just so young, and we just felt like we could conquer anything in the world, and we believed it. But most importantly, our players had bought into it, and we had great leadership on that team, and it was a fun ride. It was a fun ride to see a group of players, that had some tough times, but you had a quarterback in Josh Heupel, and that's where it all starts. And that's where it all starts today in football and college or the NFL, or it don't matter what sport it is. If you got a great quarterback, you're going to win a bunch of games. If you don't, you're not going to win any games, and that's just how it is. So, but we had a great leader and a guy that believed with all his heart. Our first team meeting when we came back in the fall, in August, for our very first meeting before we started fall camp, Josh Heupel got up and told everybody, he goes, "We're going to win the national championship this year." And I can remember sitting in the back room with, Steve Spurrier Jr. and a couple of the coaches, and he said that, and I kind of looked at Junior, and Junior kind of looked at me, and he's like, and but he did. He believed it, and he got those other players and everybody to buy into it, and that was not on our mind going in there. Was we're going to win the national championship, but we had the right guy leading us in Josh Heupel and the right coach in Bob Stoops.
Coaches aren't around the players in the summer.
Yeah.
Jerry Smith's your strength and conditioning coach. Every player that I interviewed, talked to from that team talks about that summer. They call it the summer of hell. They say it's the most difficult summer they've ever had. What were you guys hearing about that summer? And once they got back, was that a different football team that you got on?
Yeah. Well, they were in better shape. They were in better shape than they'd ever been. I can remember the very first time in our winter conditioning when we, most all of us got hired, and Bob got hired in December, and a few of us got hired in December, and some were hired in January. And then when we came back in school about the third week in January and we started our winter conditioning, those first 2 weeks of winter conditioning, guys couldn't even finish it. And guys were throwing up in the trash cans all over the field, and it was a mess. But Jerry Smith, the strength coach, gave us a chance with these kids to win football games. He did his job, and he did his job all spring long, all winter, spring, and then the summer and the conditioning. And not only physically got their mind right, but got their mental side as well.
It was a great run. You went through the November run. You beat Kansas State. You went through 3 teams that are ranked in the top. You beat number 1 Nebraska coming back. What do you remember about that ascension? But let's go back to the Texas game, though, because you just barely beat Kansas 2 weeks earlier.
Yeah.
You're smoking Texas.
Yeah.
That game really told you were good, right?
Yeah. I think that was the one that kind of really raised everybody's eyebrows, and it was like, you know what, we're pretty dang good, and we're hitting on all cylinders, and our players, especially offensively, started to become very, very comfortable in what we were doing. Again, you're spreading the field, and we had a lot of playmakers in the running backs and the receivers, and you're getting the ball to these guys out in space and seeing if the other team can tackle them, and you're trying to confuse them with motions, and we had this defense that was being built over there on discipline and toughness, and guys making sure and just doing their jobs, and it was just a perfect combination of a football team.
You go through Nebraska, you get into the Orange Bowl, you're a 12-point underdog against Florida State. Nobody thought you could win that game. You guys were undefeated. You guys thought you could win that game, though.
We did. We had all the belief in the world, as the season that we had and some of the games that we played, and again, talking about the Texas game and the Kansas State game and the Nebraska game, the Texas A&M, we knew we had something special, and it didn't matter who was across from us, and it didn't matter that we hadn't been, in the national championship picture in the last several years. We, as a staff and as players, we believed, and as a team, that we could win that game.
It was such an amazing game, too. It's the greatest defensive effort maybe in the ball game.
Yeah.
You guys had just enough offense to win the game.
Yeah.
But defensively, you have to appreciate what Mike and them came up
Oh my
with.
gosh, they did a tremendous job, because when you look at that team, there were a lot of really good players, but there were only a couple of them that turned into professional players. We've had teams that have had a lot more talent on the field, but again, they believed in the system. They believed in the scheme that Mike Stoops and Bob had put together defensively, and we had a lot of tough, hard-nosed, very athletic guys, undersized, but they just did their jobs, and at the end of the day, that's what you got to have guys do, and I think it was a defensive system and scheme that was implemented that was kind of new to some college football, kind of like our offense on that side was, and so that gave them a chance to be a little bit better and give offensive teams problems.
With a running back at that time by the name of Quentin Griffin, I think he's the most underappreciated, and one of the most underappreciated running backs in NBA history. Quentin is a really, really good football player.
Yeah, and what a special young man. I can still see his face right now. I remember, if you see him, he's got a face, he looks like he's about 10 years old. He's just always got that little grin and smile on his face. But, I've had the opportunity to be around a lot of great running backs, and I've had a chance to watch a lot of great running backs. And I think the greatest one that I've ever seen in person was a guy named Barry Sanders that, played at OSU and played with my brother. But Quentin Griffin could do things like Barry could do. Not to the extent that Barry could do, but the ability to make people miss, the ability to, the balance that he had of only being 5'6", but he had really big legs and very powerful, big calves, and just the ability, again, to make people miss and to stay on his feet was unbelievable. And he was a great pass protector. I mean, he was very special.
I was interviewing Bobby Jack Ryan on a radio show one time, and Bobby Jack was on your staff, and he goes, Quentin Griffin's the best running back I've ever seen. He goes, some of the greatest runs he had was his 1-yard runs. He'd miss 7 guys. We didn't block anybody, and he'd get us a yard.
He got back to the line of scrimmage, or he got a yard or two. There's no doubt he could do that, and he was a big part of what we did.
You guys won a lot of games. You were in 3 other national championship games.
Yeah.
You coached under, with Lincoln. You were under, you got into college football playoffs 3 times. It's hard to win national championships.
It's hard. It's hard to win championships. Period. It's hard to go undefeated. That's why at the end of the year there's typically only one team who's undefeated, and it's just not easy. I know on the outside people sometimes think it's easier than it really is, but it's very, very difficult. If you get to those moments, you get to those championships, you're playing another great football team. And those teams that are undefeated or have 1 loss, they're there for a reason, and that's because they're special football teams.
How painful is it? Is it hurt that you don't win those national championships?
Oh, yeah.
You still feel it today?
Oh, yeah, because we know if you're in our business, you know how hard it is to get there. I mean, you look as a college coach, 98% of them, maybe 99% of them will never play for a national championship. Maybe never play just for even a conference championship. I mean, they can coach 15, 20, 25, 30 years and never have the opportunity to be in a championship. So, we were fortunate to be, we were on a roll there in the early 2000s.
It's one of the greatest runs in college football history.
We were really, really, really good. We were dominating. That was back when recruiting was obviously very different. Nobody really came in the state of Texas. It was just us in Texas. If the state of Texas had 8 great players that could play for anybody in the country, OU would get 3 or 4. Texas would get 3 or 4, and maybe one of them would go to A&M. Nowadays, you got every college in America going to Texas, and everybody coming in there and recruiting those kids. And so, if there's 8 of them, you're just lucky to get 1 of them nowadays. So that's where the recruiting world has changed. But we were dominating back there, and I wish we could have maybe done a
You
few
were
things
always
differently.
playing. You were always playing on the other team's home field. It seemed like.
Yeah.
I mean, you're taking on LSU in New Orleans.
I know it, and that was tough. Ooh, that was tough. But that's not why we lost that game. But it always it helped a little bit. Then we go down in Florida in the Orange Bowl and we play USC, and that was probably the most talented team that I'd ever been a part of. I mean, we had NFL players everywhere, and we just get smoked off the field. Now we could have turned around and played the next day, and it wouldn't have been like that. It was just one of those games. Right. So, but it's tough to get to those, and they hurt when you don't win them.
The LSU game, I've always thought that if you played again, play the next 5 games against them, you're going to beat them again. You don't beat them that day, but you're driving at the very end of the game, and you have a running back that's doing great. It's just one of those frustrating things. You don't end up winning that game.
I know it, and it's just again, being in the state of Oklahoma and growing up here. I mean, we're spoiled here. I mean, and our fans don't. I don't think our fans understand that. You're not going to see the runs that we used to have, that Barry used to have, or Bob had, or even Lincoln had, of winning those championships like that. It's just not going to happen anymore because of in my opinion, the recruiting landscape, how recruiting has changed. And, now you got NIL being involved. And, if there was 50, years ago, if there were 50 of the best players across the country, those 50 players, James, they went to 8 teams. About 8 teams got those 50 guys, Well, nowadays, because of NIL, those 50 players will probably go to 30 teams.
Welcome back, CBS Sports Radio podcast. Our very special guest, Sooner legend Cale Gundy. I went to Midwest City High School and had the time of my life. Growing up in Midwest City, I think it's the perfect place, at least during our time, to grow up. We had a great time. I got into radio at KNOR Radio in Norman, and the Gundys were coming up. Your brother Mike was tearing it up at Midwest City, and I had a little 5 to 10 minute sportscast that I would do, and Mike actually came on my radio show and committed on my radio show, because I'm a bomber supporting a bomber, commits on my radio show that he's coming to Oklahoma. The next week, your dad gets hold of me and goes, Mike needs to come back on your show. I said, okay, sure. I'm Mike Gundy coming back on my show, you bet. He comes on, decommits, and goes to Oklahoma State and explains why. All right.
Pretty smart decision at the end of the day. He did the right thing.
He did the right thing. A few years later, you're coming up.
Yeah.
So Mike's at Oklahoma State, and so I'm making sure I go to those press conferences and things, and Mike's telling me, my little brother's better than me, and I'm going, come on, man. He goes, no, he's more talented than me. So I start covering you at Midwest City, and and so you and I became pretty close there. But early in those days at Midwest City, what was it like growing up in that community? The Air Force Base is right there. What was it like for you?
A very close community, very families, friendships. It was a great time, like you said. We were very blessed from little league teams, whether it was football or baseball. It didn't matter what sport it was. We were always really good, and the bonds that we had built with so many families and friends and sports pulled us all together at Midwest City, and it gave all the families a chance to get to know each other and become closer because we traveled together places, and whether it was going to baseball in the summer or football and little league or wrestling tournaments we used to go to. So, I think what made it even better was we were typically winning a lot of that. So that was a great time.
Your parents, Ray and Judy, the Gundys are famous in the first family of football in Oklahoma. Ray and Judy are great parents. We lost Judy a few years ago. But talk about their leadership with you and and how much was involved with you in Little League and growing up? And
Yeah, they your typical parents for the most part nowadays just loading you up and taking you everywhere, and giving you every season in baseball you go buy a new bat, and which can be expensive, buying new cleats, buying a new glove. Same thing in football, and we were, our sister Carrie, who's the oldest, and my brother and I, we were blessed to have, a great mom who instilled all the love and the closeness in the family, and a father who was a tremendous athlete as well, great basketball, baseball, football player that instilled the toughness and the hard work and spent so much time with us, whether, he built my brother and I a batting cage in our backyard, and going out and our dad throwing batting practice to us, or going out in the front yard and playing catch and running routes and stuff, and so it was we had a great combination, of the support and the strength of the bond of the backbone of the family, our mom, and the love, and then the father that taught us the dedication and the hard work, and then if you get out of hands, you're probably going to get a whooping, and it was a great mixture of both.
So Ray was the sports guy, and Mom was the psychology major in the family?
Yeah, no doubt, 100%. And Mom was actually, Mom grew up was born in Flint, Michigan, and was actually a pretty good ping pong player, so she had some athletic ability of her own. And no, we were blessed to have a great combination.
Your sister somehow manages to stay in the background. I don't know how she does that in this family, but I know Carrie, but I mean, somehow she hid.
Yeah, and Carrie was good. She was a very good basketball player, very good softball player. Married Jim Long, who came through Middle City and was a great football, baseball, went to Oklahoma State, played for the Angels, and they had 3 daughters that 2 of them played for Patty, Savannah and Caroline, and Maddie played at Oklahoma State. So a very talented group, and Carrie's always been like mom of the family, and she's she's about the closeness and the love and the bond and keeping everybody very tight.
All right, you're following in Mike's footsteps. Mike was a quarterback. Did you know you were going to be a quarterback? I mean, was it always that way?
Yeah, it always was. I can remember James on every Sunday in the fall. We'd have about 10 kids. Myself and my brother, and there'd be about 8 others that would come over every day about 1 or 2 o'clock, and right across the street, a good friend of ours, Jonas Sykes, we'd play football.
The Sykes family.
The Sykes family, yeah. We would play football every Sunday, and it would be 5-on-5, and I was always the quarterback on one team, and Mike was always the quarterback on the other. There was nobody else were quarterbacks. And it was all my brothers besides Jonas. Jonas was 1 year above me, and then the other, seven guys were my brother's age. So I was the youngest one. Jonas was the second youngest one, and the rest were my brother's age. So that's how it was all fall long, and for many years. And then in the wintertime when it got too cold, we would transition from there to Middle City High School basketball gymnasium, and we would play basketball. We would be in there with Ron Smith. We would be in there with Ricky Oliver. And then some other, the Kalsu brothers,
absolutely,
who always were playing football with us, would be up there. And then I'd always have a couple of my buddies, Tommy Harris, who was my class and a great athlete, and his brother John Harris. In the basketball, we would get more people because more people would like to go inside.
They're basketball players, right?
More people were basketball players, so that's what we did. I mean, it was competition all the time as a kid growing up.
One thing that let's dive into just for a second, because you and I grew up at a time where your buddies in your neighborhood they were always coming over and they were always playing. We didn't have video games and stuff. We didn't want them.
Yeah.
We were playing ball all the time. I was doing the same thing in my neighborhood that you were. Such a great time to grow up in. It's so different today. You know, I have such trouble getting my kids out to get your friends to come over and play ball. Why?
Yeah.
Because it's the thing to do. You know, it's like they don't see it. They don't do it.
There's more things going on in their life right now, and you know, it just kind of, it is what it is.
But we wouldn't want to change times, would we?
No, not at all. It was, you know, in the summertime, it was, you know, like you said, you wake up and you go outside and you're running around all day, and you typically didn't come in unless you're going to eat or the sun went down at 9 o'clock at night, you know, and we grew up there in Midwest City, right by a little 9-hole golf course, and there was a swimming pool down there, and we'd golf about 27 holes a day, and then we'd go to the pool and we'd, you know, give 50 cents or a quarter or whatever. Gosh, people make us think we're real old now saying that.
Right.
And we would go swim, and that would be a full day deal. And then about 4 o'clock, you'd come home and we would have to go to baseball practice, or we'd have baseball games, you know. And, you know, back then everybody was saying, you know, you can't swim in the days you're playing baseball, you know. And you'd go to the baseball field or whatever, and your face would just be burnt red and your eyes would be solid red, and the coach would be going, were you swimming today? And you're like, no, I wasn't. I promise you, you know. So, but that was what we did. And then, you know, we were fortunate that my dad's parents lived in Meeker. Our grandparents lived on a farm down there, had about 2,000 acres. And if there wasn't, occasionally, you know, Dad would come in about 6:30 in the morning and say, he'd open that door and say, boy, you got to get up out of bed. We got to go to the farm today. And I can remember I would lay there in bed, and I would hope that, you know, that he would maybe forget or think I was too tired. And he'd come back in there and say, boy, you better get your butt out of bed right now. And then, you know, then my mom would come in and she'd say, Joseph, Cale, you better get up. You better get up. I'm like, Mom, please. And she's like, no, you need to go. And I look back on it now, we would go down there, and that was such a great time of our life. I would give anything to do it again. And again, it's a little bit like how I grew up wrestling. It was the toughest sport I was ever a part of, and it was one of the best things that my dad ever made me do. But going to the farm and working down there and being around our grandparents and our cousins instilled some toughness and some discipline in some ways that were the best things that our parents made us do.
Midwest City was such a great football factory at the time. Jim Darnell, Coach Evans, you know, it's just, you're following Mike. So kind of set the timeline, because Mike's doing his deal and you're in junior high.
Yeah.
So you're coming up, but you're running the same plays, aren't you?
Yeah. When my brother was a senior in high school, I was an 8th grader. You know, it worked out that when he was a freshman and 9th grader and so on, so whenever he graduated from college was my first year in college, and that Pat Jones hired him as a tight end coach. I mean, my brother had to take like 26 hours his last semester so he could graduate, so he could become an assistant coach.
That's interesting. Amazing, really.
Yeah. So, but we were running the same offense. Ron Smith, who you know, was our quarterback coach and offensive coordinator, and has been a great coach and a great, you know, family in Midwest City, and has coached all over the state. I mean, he would come over, and I can remember us sitting in our living room, in our dining room table, and he would come over, and it'd be my brother, Ron, in the middle, and I'd be on the side. Even when I was young, an 8th grader or whatever, and Ron would be talking coverages and plays and stuff, and I'd be sitting there, in my pajamas or shorts and T-shirts, and I'd be watching and learning as well. And so Ron got with us early and got with me early, and again, we were very good coming up through Monroney Junior High, our football teams, and we were very fortunate that we had very good players and we were talented, and that I could throw the ball probably a little bit better than most kids could at that age. So we started kind of installing some of that offense even in the junior high there, sent down from the high school.
So Mike graduates. You start as a ninth grader, if I remember?
No, sophomore.
Sophomore. So you become that's a 3-year start.
I did. So they called me up my freshman year.
That's what I thought.
And I went to they played their very first playoff game at Middle City High School, but they brought me up to be the kicker. And because I could kick off.
See, people, you played baseball, you could kick, you wrestled.
I made a 48-yarder as a ninth grader at Monroney Junior High. So they brought me up. Dick Evans and Ron Smith, they wanted to bring me up, and they knew I was a quarterback in case anything happened to their guys. I could possibly be a guy, but I could also do the kicking duties as a freshman. And then I started as a sophomore moving in.
So you start quarterbacking in Midwest City, and your name starts getting out there. Yeah. Recruiting's starting to pick up a little bit. Super prep's rolling, and so you've got some of those things. And I'm getting phone calls from Alan Wallace, who's this Cale Gundy guy, but. Are you feeling it, or do you know about it? Are you just so into being at Midwest City, and you're so young? Maybe did you realize people were talking about you nationwide?
Both. It's a little both. When you're young, you don't worry about it. You're just having fun, But I knew what was taking place, and I knew my brother was he was setting me up. He was introducing my name and who I was to you and to whether it's people on the radio or TVs or whatever. He was telling them, hey, I've got a younger brother that's pretty good and they're pretty good and so I was being prepared for it. But again, when you're young like that, you don't think too much into it, and you're enjoying the time being a kid in junior high and running around and playing ball, and you're starting to get girlfriends back then, and then in high school, but it was amazing times, James. We were very blessed, like I said. My brother and I both played in the Little League World Series for the Oklahoma Outlaws. There's an organization, it's still an organization here today called the Oklahoma Outlaws. My brother, when he was 11, 12, they went to Pennsylvania and played in it. And then when I got to 11, 12, our team went to Pennsylvania to play in it. It's an amazing experience. And then, in high school, we won some World Series, some Summer League, majors, World Series, traveling all over the country. We were blessed to be surrounded with a bunch of good players, and
absolutely.
It makes it a lot better when you win. There's no doubt, and we were very successful.
You start getting recruited your senior year. You're rated top 5 quarterback in the country by Super Prep. Talk about your recruiting process.
Yeah. So it was, I was obviously spending a lot of time at Oklahoma State with my brother. We would go. There was always a handful of us, my buddies and I. We would go to the Oklahoma State games. For the most part. Sometimes we would go to the OU games, but we would go to OSU and watch my brother play, and then we'd always stay all night with him. Or a couple of my buddies, they had some brothers that were in school there, and they were Sigma News or whatever, and we would stay all night with them, and our older brothers would get us in everywhere. And, we just had the time of our life. But because of my brother, he helped get my name out there, and I was blessed. My first football scholarship offer was Tom Osborne. The summer going into my sophomore year, I go to football camp up there in Nebraska.
Wow.
And after camp, Tom brings me in the office and he offers me a scholarship. So that was my first football. In 8th grade, I got my first baseball scholarship by Gene Stevenson at Wichita State.
Right, wow.
Who back then, Wichita State
legendary.
was one of the dominant, who I'm still friends with today. He's reached out to me several times this fall. Wonderful, wonderful person. So my name started to get scattered everywhere. When I took trips out of high school, my visits, I went to, let me think here. I went to Alabama. I went to Clemson, wow. I went to Notre Dame, and I went to Texas. I took 4. And I did not go to OU, did not go to OSU. I've been to those places. I knew all about them. And all my trips consisted of football and baseball. And I never thought I'd really go to Oklahoma State to play football. But at that time, they were one of the dominating baseball programs in the country.
Right.
I almost just went there to play baseball. I almost just went to Texas to play for Cliff and to play baseball. They were dominating. I made a wonderful decision to stay in state and play for a powerhouse in Oklahoma. I felt like that if I had a chance to come down there and play and have success and do the right things and meet a lot of people, that it would, in return, help me someday in life. And obviously it did. It gave me a great opportunity to come back and be a coach there for many years. It's opened a lot of doors, a lot of great friendships.
You go to OU at a time they're transitioning from option football to throwing. I always thought that was hard on you. And I think when people are critical of you as a quarterback during that time, I'm always reminding them he basically had running backs as receivers, tight ends as wideouts. I mean, it was a tough time. Now, all those guys are your buddies, and you made it work. But what you guys accomplished is really pretty amazing when you think about it.
It was a challenge. It was a challenge, and Gary Gibbs wanted to transition from the true wishbone and head in that direction. And you know what, Barry was doing that. Barry was doing that with Troy Aikman. You know, before when Troy got hurt, then he went back with Jamel and Charles and so on. And but that transition, if Troy would have not gotten hurt, that transition would have already been made before I've gotten there with Coach Switzer. And but it was a challenge. You know, my freshman year, I think I might have threw the ball 7 times a game. And I can remember having to run option. We weren't in the wishbone, but we were in the I formation, but we were still running different schemes of the option. And you know, I was a good athlete, but I wasn't like those guys, and it was tough. I mean, you know, having to chase outside linebackers and defensive ends and trying to get all the way down the line. I mean, it wasn't the smartest thing or the best thing I could do, but. You know, and like you said, you know, the guys we're the offensive linemen that we're playing, those are true run guys. And then you try to pass protect, and that's difficult trying to teach them. They never, you know, in high school, teams just didn't really throw the ball very much back then. You know, there were only a few that did. So it was a huge transition. And, you know, we started to bring in receivers, you know, the Corey Warrens, the Albert Halls, the Jawan Pennies, the P.J. Mills. You know, we had some tight ends in Ricky Brady's, you know, Stephen Alexander. So we were bringing some guys in, and over the years, we went through some challenging times. And my first 2 years, we were on probation with some stuff that went on at Oklahoma, and it was challenging, but we kept our head above water. But we were really, you know, whenever Coach Coker left and we brought in, you know, Watson Brown, he really, I think he, in 93, my senior season, really got us to turn the corner offensively and, you know, started to spread things out and to utilize our talents.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. Towards the end of your career, are you healthy?
Oh shoot! It was tough. I was beat up a little bit.
Well, you're playing baseball too.
Yeah.
And look, Cale, I've always thought you could have played pro baseball.
Yeah.
You were the first time I saw you pitch, because I was blessed. I was always getting to hang around the coaches and things, and I saw you throw your bullpen. And they're going, he's throwing 93 miles an hour. And I'm going, yes. Because I'm thinking you're going to be anchor this OU pitching staff, and we're going to be pretty good, you know.
If things could have, you know, hindsight's always 20/20. But I was a good quarterback prospect too.
You were.
I could throw the ball. I was very successful in baseball. But I think I've mentioned to you before, I had a slight shoulder injury that most people didn't know about summer going into my senior year in high school playing volleyball. And it affected me in the fall. I used to have to go over on Fridays and get cortisone shots stuck in my shoulder just to be able to play games in the fall. And I never really could, baseball-wise, quite get back up to being dominant. I was good. And I went to OU and I played one season down there, but in high school throwing, 91, 92, 93 at times, when I was 15, 16 years old. After that injury my senior year, I could only get up to about 88 years old, 88
miles an hour.
88 miles per hour. So it was, but again, I wouldn't have been able to enjoy all the success and do the things that I've done if I wouldn't have played football at OU. So things happen for a reason, And God didn't want me to play in the major leagues. He wanted me to go play football.
And he wanted you to coach in football.
That's right.
You become a graduate assistant at OU when you graduate, right? Now, that's how you start your coaching career?
I was a student coach, so I played my first 4 years, and I had another semester left to graduate. I was drafted by the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the Canadian League. I got traded to Las Vegas Posse. They at that time they were trying to bring the Canadian Football League down into the U.S. So they had 6 or 8 teams. Ended up not making that team with Las Vegas. Came back and I was a student coach with Watson Brown that fall, and I was going to get back into the football again with the Canadian team. And that's when Watson Brown got the head job at UAB, and he called me, and he'd always said, he goes, hey, if I become a head coach again, I'd love for you to come join my staff, And so 23 years old, he offered me a full-time job as an assistant. And, I just made the decision that, this is what I want to do, even though I love playing football, and I could have, probably hung around up there and played several years or whatever. If the right timing was right and got on the right team. But that's where my career started at UAB, and I was 23 years old. So my wife and I loaded up and went to Birmingham, Alabama, and coached at UAB for 4 years, and it was a great 4 years of our lives.
Before we break again, Watson Brown is a big figure in your life.
Yeah, he's, he was my quarterback coach my senior year, and I was a student coach with him 1 year, and we were very, very close. I can remember, I think, James, it was the very first spring practice I had going into my senior season. We hired him in January, February, March. We got to spring ball, and it was our very first practice. I threw 2 interceptions, and he pulled me aside, and he chewed my butt out, and I was a different person from there on. I was, he made sure that I knew that if I was going to be the quarterback at the University of Oklahoma, that I wasn't going to throw interceptions out there, and you ain't going to throw them out there on air when nobody's hitting you. So, he and I developed a great relationship, and we were very close. And a very smart. Gosh, he was a
savant offensive guy.
He was a crazy offensive mind in football, and he called everything. He signaled everything on the sidelines. Like Lincoln, and like Lincoln does. You got somebody upstairs maybe telling him what's in the back end, but he's calling everything. And I can remember, Watson and looking at, being, turning and looking on the sidelines, and he's kind of looking and seeing what the defensive front is and what the back end, and then he gives me a signal, Instead of, a lot of guys are upstairs looking down, he was doing everything from the sideline.
Yeah, he was amazing. He really, really was. Folks, this is our CBS Sports Radio podcast. We're talking to the great Cale. Hi again, everybody, and welcome back to our CBS Sports Radio podcast. Our guest is Cale Gundy. And Cale, you're on this staff with Brent Venables. You're saying nothing but good things about Brent. Brent's saying nothing good things about you. It looks like a great staff. Everybody is so happy you're still in this staff. Then one day you're not a part of the staff anymore.
Yeah.
What happened?
It was, one of those 10, 15 seconds, you'd like to, have taken back and do things differently. I think everybody kind of knows the story and knows what happened. And it was our first meeting after our first practice, and in their coaching. And I'm a very, I'm into practice. I get into practice.
Passionate.
Passion. In the meeting room, I'm the same way, and my players all know that. And they know it's nothing but love, but passion. And my job is to get you better, so you need to be all in and locked in. And it was just I come in there that day, and I tell everybody, I said, hey, all right, everybody get their iPads out. I said, I got a bunch of notes here that I want to cover with you. I didn't have time to send them the notes. I typically send them the notes ahead of time so they can have them on their iPad, but we were so busy and late coming out of the first days of meetings that I said, everybody get their iPads out and jot all these notes down that I'm going to go over with you. And so I start to, read off about 10, 15 minutes worth of notes, and I see I've got about 16 players in there, and there's a couple coaches in there. Coach Washington's in there, LaDamian, who ended up taking my spot over this fall, done a great job, and there's another young coach that are in there, and we got 16 players, and everybody's taking notes, and I just happen to know this one young man wasn't taking notes, and I knew it, but I didn't say anything, and a great kid, young kid, he's a freshman, and still trying to learn, and probably trying to figure out what he can do and what he can't do and what he can get away with and what he can't, and so we go through the notes, and then we turn on the film. We start watching film and coaching through everything, and we kind of get to this one moment where this one young man, he didn't do it right in practice, and some of the notes that I had covered with them was his correction. And so I had asked him, I said, hey, so what were you supposed to do here? What was your split supposed to be? What were you supposed to do here? And he couldn't answer me. And I said, well, I just told you a while ago. I just got done reading all this to you. I said, all you got to do is just read it back. I said, you wrote it down, right? And he said, oh, yeah, Coach, I wrote it down. And so anyways, long story short, kind of go back and forth there for about 10, 15, 20 seconds. And he said he wrote it down, and he's kind of trying to thumb through there. And I go over there and grab his iPad up, pick it up, and I start reading it. And, I read, 10 or 15 words, and I finally stopped and realized that I wasn't reading anything that had to do with football. It was he was writing down his own rap video, his own song, and so I'd kind of froze, and we kind of got out of that and kind of talked through it, and said, hey, you're here to play football. This is our time to focus and to get better. You can do that on the side, and we finished the meetings for the next 40 minutes. Everything was fine. So that's what happened, and it got back to, I think it started to. We got out of meeting, and everybody we went to dinner, and probably what happened is they got into the dinner and the chow hall where everybody's laughing and talking, and I think some of the guys in the room were kind of giving him a hard time that Coach Gundy had busted his butt and caught him, and he was reading your stuff and this and that, and then it probably started just trickling, and then before you know it, it kind of turned into a different point of view, or the story was not exactly portrayed, or it was not said or talked about the right way how it really happened, so it was took differently, and then but anyways, the higher ups, and one of them in particular just didn't. It was time for me to move on, so it was crazy. I knew then, I knew that night when I got off the phone with somebody that night about 9:30 that I knew I wasn't going to be coaching there much longer, and it was amazing that I understand what I did, but I also understand who I am and what I've done, and the person that I've been, and the relationships and everything that I put in to a place down there almost 27, 28 years, and something that happened in less than 10, 15 seconds, they could, ask you need to go do something else. So, but things happen for a reason, and I'm blessed and happy that I'm doing other things now, and that I'm not a part of that. I miss my players. I miss some people. But somebody just didn't want me to be around anymore, and you know what? It's a blessing that I'm not around them, and I'm in a better place right now, and I'm enjoying life right now.
I think you had to be happy that Joe Mixon, Mark Clayton, player after player, Quentin Griffin, everybody came to your defense. Yeah. They all talked about he's not a racist. Yeah. He's not anything remotely related to that. They talked about how you helped them, supported them. Yeah. That had to be the best thing about all this.
Well, I mean, that's, James, that's just who I am. And that's not patting myself on the back, but I love people. I love people. I love all people, and I always have. And I will stand on this table and say that I've developed better relationships, as good if not better relationships than anybody who's ever been down there. Deeper relationships with moms and dads and grandparents and aunts and uncles. And still to this day, I talk to former players. I talk to former players' parents. I call them on their birthdays. But that's what I like to do. I love people, and so, but again, that just wasn't important enough for somebody. Somebody just didn't want me there, So, and again, you know what? I had a hell of a ride down there. I've been fortunate, blessed enough, as you know, that nobody has won more football games or been a part of more winning football games as a player coach than me.
Right.
And let me tell you what, that's strong. I mean, that is impressive.
Right.
I wasn't a head coach. I wasn't a Bud Wilkinson or a Barry Switzer or a Bob Stoops, but when it comes to winning games as a player coach, nobody's been on the sideline more than me and been a part of that, and nobody will ever take that away from me. And I don't know. It's going to be a long time if anybody can get in that category. So, but no, James, I know who I am. And people know who I am, and it has been overwhelming. It has been crazy. I can't. I mean, I was out of the country here a month ago. I was in a Belize airport, and a family stopped me. And they were Kansas State people, and they recognized me and. Hey, we're just sick. What happened to you? We remember you forever. And, the dad was talking about we've, kind of followed you and your brother's career, know know everything that you've done and how you've helped out down there at Oklahoma as a coach and as a player. And it don't matter where I am. I can go to Walmart, a gas station. I was at the Thunder game last night, and I got people stopping me everywhere. And the overwhelming support has just been beautiful, and that makes me proud because I know how I was raised by my mom and dad, and that's what the type of person they wanted me to be. One
of the things that you've had a chance to do is to go watch some of your players.
Yeah.
How cool is that been?
Oh, it's been awesome. It's been awesome, and I still want to get out to watch more, and I still have plans. It's just the timing of it, but to watch, some of the guys that have moved on and for me to have been important in their lives at times, in the recruiting and the relationships and the mentoring, and I think that's what it is. I think it's just not coaching football, it's mentoring. It's preparing 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old young men about the real world out there, and just not football, but just about life and the challenges that you're going to run in. I believe in preparing and talking about things before things happen, and making sure that they're aware of it. And again, I just think that goes back to mentoring, and I miss that. I miss being in the lives of former players, and I'm still very close with a lot of those guys that are on the roster right now. I talk to them, and and I've had tons of relationships. I've had a mom call me the other day, and who's a player who's still there. I've had parents call me all season long because they know I kind of have an idea of what's going on, and maybe they don't feel like they've got good enough relationships with anybody up there that they can talk to. So, and that's fine. I'm not there, but I know what's going on, so, and I enjoy that. I love that. I love helping people and being a part of people's lives.
That's why won't you get back into something, whatever it is, if coaching, athletic administration, something where you're helping young people?
Yeah. No, it's a big world. There's a lot of different things out there, and I've had the opportunity this fall to experience some of those opportunities and to see what else is out there. The one thing I've learned is, my whole life has just been football. It's been sports, and it's been great, but it can really consumes you. You wake up early in the morning, you go do this, and then you come home at night, you go to bed, and you wake up the next day and go. And that kind of seems that's what everybody does. But your mind is 24 hours football, and recruiting. And there's other things out there, but I've had opportunities this fall to really experience other things that are out there and see that, there are more things out there. And there's other things out there that you can have just as much success at, and you can enjoy doing as much as possible, as every bit as much as you used to during football. And the one thing that I have found that kind of we're touched on is I just love being around people, and whether it's older people, young people, I love people. And so whatever I end up doing, the coaching deal, I tell you, James, it's there's unbelievable great challenges college football is heading into in the direction of the transfer portal and the NIL. There's enough going on that I really don't know if I ever want to get back into it. I would ever only get back into it in my mind, and I have told him that is go help my brother. And I've told him, I said, you're the only reason that I think I would ever get back into coaching. I said, if you need my help and you feel like I can help you, because of the love that I have for you, I would do it. And I said, I'm going to tell you this, it's going to take a lot of money, though. So
You're making how much, big brother?
Yeah.
Think about
that. But anyways, I'm going to, whatever I do, I've really found that I enjoy being around people, and I love being around people.
I'm blessed to have you as a friend. You've come on my radio show a number of times, or we've done a number of interviews at OU. And you got to where you said, look, man, when you introduce me, because I do these elaborate interviews, and Coach Switzer, I drive him nuts with those sometimes, but he said, you've got to say that I married a beautiful woman and I've outpunted my coverage. Yeah. Well, Christy and I are good friends too. And everybody loves Christy, and she's a great attorney in town. But you definitely outpunted your coverage.
There's no doubt. She's special in a lot of areas, and we're blessed to have two beautiful children, and Casey and Kat, and they're out of school now.
Well, Kat's like her mother. She
is. She's beautiful and hard-headed, stubborn, and talented, and fiery, and all that stuff. But no, my wife and I, we've had a beautiful relationship, and like everybody else, we've had our ups and downs. And you know what? That's part of it. That's what, if you can stick with it and fight through it and work your way through it, that's what makes it so beautiful and been very special. Yeah.
No doubt about it. Has she kicked you out of the house and told you to go to work yet, or?
No, she's kind of mentioned it a time or two. We've kind of I've gotten in a pretty good rhythm of kind of what I do, and I wake up in the mornings and go get my coffee, and we have a Bengal cat, which this may sound kind of weird, but he's the neatest cat, and I let him outside in the backyard. We got kind of big land in the back, and he runs around. I kind of keep an eye on him, and because we don't want him to jump over fence. We got 8-foot fences, so it's kind of a privacy deal, but kind of keep an eye on him, and then he'll come back in, and then I'll go get on my Peloton and ride the Peloton, and then typically it's around lunchtime, and try to, this last few months, I've met up with a lot of people, and just kind of reunited a little bit with some lunches, and I've been fortunate and blessed to had the opportunity to spend time with Coach Barry Switzer and Mike Henry. They've been really great with me to spend time with them, and to watch what they've been doing with what they've got a company or a group called Coach's Cabana, which has been very neat, and just to be around Coach Switzer and Coach Henry, or not Coach Henry, but Mike Henry, it's just been a blessing, And I was with Coach Switzer last night, and he, people refer to him as a king. I mean, he seriously,
he is the king.
He is unbelievable. I mean, and I know people know it, but as much time as I spent around him, I mean, he is a favorite of everybody, of absolutely everybody. And he's 85 years old. His mind is still unbelievable. And the relationships and the memories that he has, it's a great thing. He's starting to get he's slowing down a little bit, but he's a special person.
Let's get into recruiting.
Yeah.
Cale, you will always be one of the greatest recruiters of all time. When you were the running back coach at OU, they told you to go get the very best running backs, and you did. So let's dive into a couple of stories here. Adrian Peterson. Adrian's the number one player in the country. He's in Palestine, Texas. It's a unique situation. His father's in prison at the time, and it's a weird deal.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Well, it was, I was, again, when I came here, when Bob got hired in 99, I was 26 years old. So, I was still, I felt like I hit the grand jackpot to come back to my home and to be coaching for the Oklahoma Sooners. And, being an old quarterback and baseball player and a kid that's had a lot of success, I felt like I could do about anything and I could recruit anybody. And to be able to walk around with an Oklahoma shirt on or a jacket on would give me the opportunity to step in the door. And then all I had to do was it was up to me. And I've always had great belief in myself. But that was a different deal, and that was a challenge. But we had his father Nelson, like you had mentioned, was down in the penitentiary down there, and but we set up a meeting the very first day that we could go out in December. It might have even been the last day of November or the first day of December. That Darryl Wyatt, who was a wide receiver coach, and myself and Coach went down to go see his dad, and we had been granted permission to have this meeting with Nelson, AD's dad, and it turned out that he had some ties to Oklahoma anyways. He grew up in Florida, the father did, was recruited and had great interest in Oklahoma as a basketball player, but ended up going to junior college, and things kind of unraveled from there a little bit. And but I always had a huge passion and love for Oklahoma Sooners, and not only basketball but football. So we had our foot was in the door, and being able to see him and sit down with him for a couple hours one day, and then a couple days later, other schools were starting to call and wanted to come down there, and they said no, nobody else is going to go see him. So that gave us a great opportunity. That gave us a great opportunity and a great advantage, and then developing a great relationship with the mom, Benita, and again, we were rolling back then, and I developed a great relationship with AD, and he was truly the first guy that I can remember going and watching in high school that when they were on offense, you better not go get popcorn or a Coke or go to the bathroom, because he literally could score any given time he was given the ball in high school. He was special. And watching him play basketball, he was, I know he wasn't like this, but he wasn't the best scorer in the world, but he was a physical, ferocious defensive player.
Great
rebounder, very powerful. A little bit like Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon the same way. Joe would tell you right now, nah, Coach, I play. Better than that. I can score 20. I'm like, nah, both of you guys will get 5 fouls before the fourth quarter, But you get a lot of rebounds and some dunks, and, you're probably shooting about 50% at the free throw line, both of you, But I had a great relationship with him, and I was always real with him. But I've always been real with whoever I talked to in recruiting. And I had told him, I said, one time, and I think he's even made the comments about it, that there was one thing that I told him, and that was when it clicked in his mind that he was coming to Oklahoma. And I told him, I said, you know what, you can come here. And play for Oklahoma and help us win championships, or you can go somewhere else and watch us win championships, because we're going to do it with or without you. And he said that was it. He said he knew right then that. So
you did that at that school, right? I mean, at his school, because he had gone to Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Actually, I play a very small role in this because I'd called him, and in passing, he just said, "Yeah, I'm going to go to Texas A&M this weekend." I said, Have you told Oklahoma that? No. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but I called you and said, anyway.
Yeah.
So, tell about that story. You walk into that school, though. He doesn't know you're coming, right?
No, he didn't know. And everybody was telling him, like a lot of people still still today, they tell you what they want to tell you, and, you come here and you're going to start, we'll promise you this, you're going to be the day one starter, you're going to win a Heisman, this and that. No, I told AD, I said, you're going to come here and you're going to have to earn it, and I'm going to coach you hard. And if you ain't going to class, I'm going to stay on you. I'm going to make you go to class. And if you're not working hard, I'm going to make you work hard. I'm going to make you be the best running back on the football team. And if you're not, you're going to stay on the sidelines over there. And so he appreciated that because of how his dad raised him, and of hard work and toughness and discipline, and always just being the best and outworking everybody. So I think he gravitated to me because I just wasn't somebody putting my arm around him and making all these promises. But that's what it was, and that's what I told him, and that's what solidified it, and that's what got him to say he was coming to Oklahoma.
It's one of the legendary quotes, or just one of the legendary developments in recruiting. I have a few guys, Alan Wallace Steele, Rick Kimbrough, and a few guys, but we always talk about unique things, and that recruiting effort comes up. DeMarco Murray.
Yeah. So DeMarco, the great thing with DeMarco was great athlete. Bob and I had went out there to see him in the spring. And David White was the head coach at Bishop Gorman High School.
Whitey.
The nickname Whitey, who's coached here in state, coached all over, has done a great job. Bishop Gorman, which is a kind of a powerhouse now, and a beautiful school with facilities that's backed by the Fertitta brothers, who used to own UFC, who have since sold it, who put a lot of money into that. But back then, this was a small little Catholic little private school. I mean, like a smaller than Ridgecrest Elementary School that I went to. But Bob and I were out there, and we were watching. We went in the gym and met with Coach White, and he said, "Hey, come over here. DeMarco was over here, shooting baskets, playing around, da da da." So we walk over there, and we'd already watched him play on film, and he was. I mean, it was like a computer game. I mean, he was obviously the best player on the field and could just run around anybody. Didn't play as good a talent as maybe Bishop Gorman plays nowadays, but it was incredible. But anyway, so we go over to him, and David White, Coach White, said, DeMarco, he goes, show him that one dunk that you do where you throw the basketball off the wall over there. So sure enough, he took the basketball and he threw it up off the wall behind the backboard. It hits the wall, comes down, bounces. He jumps up, catches it with one hand, and he dunks it. And
unreal.
Bob looked at Whitey, Coach White, and he goes, "You make sure and tell him he's got an offer to University of Oklahoma." So we get in the big recruiting battle, and it's between us and USC. Pete Carroll, obviously they were doing great things. Already won a national championship, and but the difference was this. Pete Carroll wanted him to play corner. DeMarco Murray wanted to play running back.
Of course.
And
right.
DeMarco Murray could have played in the NFL as a corner. Would have been a fabulous corner. And DeMarco is one of the only players that I ever really, everybody thinks, oh, I can go over and play corner. Like AD couldn't play corner. He just couldn't do it. AD couldn't play receiver. Joe Mixon could also play some receiver. Joe would have been more of a linebacker, but DeMarco was talented enough that he could have been an NFL player as a running back, or he could have played a corner. He would have been a great corner because he's got length, and he's 6 foot tall. But Pete Carroll wanted him to play corner, and we wanted him to play running back. So that's why we got him, and that's why he became a Sooner.
Joe Mixon.
Yeah. So Joe, again, I just love him. His mom, Alyssa, great people. So the story with Joe, this is a great one. I don't know if you've ever heard this, James, but his the fall of his junior year, Kevin Wilson was our offense coordinator, and this was during the season. He would come in. We would go to practice. After practice, we'd come upstairs and we'd get in our offensive team room and we'd watch film and watch the practice from that day. And usually took us a couple hours. Well, I get a phone call, about 8 o'clock that night on, I don't know, Monday or Tuesday night. I didn't recognize the cell phone number. I'm in meetings, so I don't pick up, don't think nothing of it. Nobody leaves a message. The phone just rings, and I can't remember area code's 915 or 914 or 951 or something. What is it, California area code? No big deal. Well, the following, I think these were Monday nights. The following Monday night, we're sitting in there, same thing, phone rings. Look down, same cell phone number, don't have a name on it, don't answer it. Nobody leaves a message. Fast forward a week later, so this is the third week in a row, same phone call, same time, Monday night, and I tell Kevin, I'm like, Kevin, this person's called me 3 weeks in a row. I got to take this call. So I step out of the meeting, and I answer. I said, hello, and somebody says, Coach Gundy? I said, yes, sir. He goes, my name's Joe Mixon. I said, okay. He goes, I'm a running back, and I'm out here in California, and I want to come play for Oklahoma. I said, you do? I didn't know anything about him, never heard about him. I didn't know anything. And he said, yeah. He goes, Coach, I know you've coached the Adrian Petersons, DeMarco Murrays. I know that, you've had some of the best out there. And he goes, I want to come play for you. And I said, well, I tell you this. I said, I've been in meetings, and I'm still in a meeting, and I'll come back. And I said, when I get out, I'll go in there and watch your film and then, see how you look. And then, if need be, I'll call your coach in the morning. So I didn't think much of it, but went back in there, watched film. And I was in my room, that office that night about 9 o'clock. And I said, you know what, I'm going to type in Joe Mixon. So I typed in Joe Mixon and watched him. I was like, oh, my gosh, this guy is the real deal. So I've been kind of blowing this phone call off for 3 weeks, but he actually reached out to me. I called his coach the very next morning and, got in all the information. And I said, hey, I'm gonna be out there in the spring or in the winter, December, this time when the coaches are on the road and come out there, because he had told me he played basketball. And sure enough, the kid was, he's 6'2". Back then he's 215 pounds. Could jump out of a gym. But on the football field, he was unbelievable. He was a punt returner for us at OU. He could do it all. He could play receiver, a kick returner, punt returner, just had unbelievable talent and skills. But that's where the relationship started, and it was because he reaching out to me. And if I would have never answered that call, or I don't know what would have happened. But that's how we got him at OU.
You recruited Samaje Perine,
Yep.
who became the all-time leading rusher at OU at the same time.
Yeah.
And all of us were shocked you were able to get two incredible running backs in the same year like that.
Yeah.
Samaje.
Well, Samaje was from Pflugerville-Hendrickson, and I would say the neat thing about those two boys, young men, was they wanted to come to Oklahoma and just knock on wood, pat myself on the back, whatever. I don't mean to do it. They wanted to come play for me. They knew what I was able to do a good job of developing running backs and turn them into good football players and things like this, and that we were going to win. So they weren't worried about the other. And I talked to them about, being here to help each other out and staying fresh, and you getting 15, 20 carries, and you're getting 15, 20 carries and helping you. And what's that going to do? That's going to keep you more healthy, and it's going to keep you more fresh through the course of the season. We'll try to find ways to use different guys in different areas, and Joe at wide receiver some, and in the special teams, whether it's a kick returner or punt returner, so he can get more touches. And they are very different, because that's not like most players nowadays.
Right.
most players do not want to do that. They
That's right.
don't want to go and follow up. But occasionally you'll find two young men that just they know what they want and they're not worried about the other one, and that's how we got him there.
D.D. Westbrook.
Yeah, D.D. He was out of Blinn Junior College, and oh gosh, I won't blank on. I'm trying to think his high school. He went to Cameron Yo High School, and started recruiting him down there. Just extremely talented. I mean, smooth wide receiver, punt returner, kick returner, as well. I mean, the best player on the field when he went to Blinn Junior College, and but his country is all get out. I mean, he was unbelievably country. Started recruiting him. We had some work to do academically. Had to challenge him. D.D. wanted to play football and wanted to chase girls. Those are the two things that he liked doing at a high level. And I had to kind of, I had to talk to him about, hey, if you're going to come to Oklahoma, here's what you got to do. One, you got to get in that weight room. He's like, nah, Coach, I just can't do that. I can't get in the weight room. I'm like, no.
He's a sprinter, Coach. Come on.
I'm like, you're going to have to get in the weight room. He's like, Coach, look at me. I mean, look how pretty I look, this and that. I'm like, no. You need to get some muscle on you. He was like, Coach, look at the muscle. I said, no, that's not a muscle. That's just an arm, But that's how he would talk to you. And then, and I told him, I said, then we're going to have to teach you how to eat too. I said, you're going to have to gain some weight. He was like 158 pounds.
Well, he loves McDonald's.
It was Brahms. It was Brahms. They had a Brahms in town, and that's all he ate was Brahms hamburgers. Brahms hamburgers. And but I told him, I said, man, when you come here, we're going to have to change your eating habits, and it's going to take time. I said, you'll be okay with it. I said, I went through it as a kid too. There's times I didn't want to eat anything that was green, but one day I woke up and it wasn't bad. You put some salt and pepper on it and go on down the road, or put some cheese on it or something. And we developed a great relationship that way. And, because I was more worried about other things than just, him as a football player. I cared about him academically. I cared about his health and his strength. And, man, it was baby steps. It was literally baby steps when we came here, getting him in the weight room and doing it consistently. And trust me, whenever you come to Oklahoma, whether you like it or not, you're going to go to the weight room. I mean, we're not one of those programs where, don't worry about it. He's a great player. He don't have to lift. No, you're going to do it. And, I mean, we had these conversations back and forth. And anyways, long story short, wow, what an unbelievable career that he had. And one of the nicest young men, just as happy. And I know he's got his food truck there in Norman in Oklahoma City. Matter of fact, he was actually he stopped by our house and visited with my wife and I about a month ago. I think he's been picked up on a team with the Vikings or Detroit Green Bay Packers. He's on a travel squad or something right now. But he's a super, super talented guy.
Hollywood Brown. Yeah,
so Marquise, grew up in Miami, went to the College of the Canyons out in California. So when Marquise came out of high school, he had one scholarship offer, and it was to a small school. Don't know, I can't remember who that was, but he didn't want to go to that school. So, he was told, and we didn't recruit him then. We didn't know anything about him. But he was told, hey, just go to a junior college, go play one season, then you'll get some more schools to look at you. And so he left Miami. He went to the College of the Canyons out in California. He got there that summer in June or July. He weighed about 148 pounds. He plays that season, and going through that season, Lincoln and Dennis Simmons, who was our wide receiver coach, and myself, we were like, we need to we need to bring in a junior college receiver. We need speed. Well, we had found him, watched him, and got out there and started recruiting him. And he came back, and this is what he wanted to do. And we got him in the weight room, got him bigger, and got him stronger. And the rest is history with him too.
I remember the one time media, first time we see him, and I didn't ask this question, so you can't be mad at me, and you weren't mad at me. It was another guy, but he goes, he looks so small.
Yeah.
And you were angry at the question. And I don't blame you, but you looked at him and said, just watch him play, or just wait a second.
Yeah. Well, I've said this, and I've noticed this more and more this fall, and I've said this to a lot of people. If you look at NFL teams nowadays, you're seeing more guys that are really small. You're seeing guys that are 5'5", 5'6", 5'7", play in the NFL and have success. Why? Because nobody can catch them. Nobody can cover them. And, years ago, it used to be all about size. And, yeah, you want guys that run 4.4, but you want them to be 6'1", 6'2", 210, 220, or whatever. But you look in the NFL nowadays, across the board, there are so many more smaller wide receivers, and it's because they throw them the ball and guys can't tackle them in space. So and Marquise he's definitely one of those guys.
You're listening to our CBS Sports Radio podcast with Cale Gundy. Back with more in just a moment. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our CBS Sports Radio podcast. We're interviewing a great Sooner, Cale Gundy. College football today is different. The NIL, the transfer portal. Your thoughts on college football today and where it's headed?
I think it's going to be a challenge. I don't like the direction it's heading into. Not that I know everything, but the transfer portal is basically what it is. It's just a free agency, and it's going to be here. And you're going to be losing players every year, and you're going to be having to go out and find players every year. But here's the deal. In my opinion, you're just swapping out players, and unless you can find a unbelievable quarterback like a Caleb Williams, or an unbelievable running back, or maybe a difference maker on the defensive line, an edge rusher, a sack specialist, most of the guys you're just swapping guys out, there's so many reasons why players are leaving nowadays, and one, because there's multiple. One, that they're not good enough to play where they are. Two, they've been there at that school and maybe they just want to do something differently. That's fine. Three, maybe they think there's something out there financially. So there's so many different reasons why players are leaving, and some are good and some are bad. But I just don't. I unless you can't get a guy that's going to put his hand on the ball and touch the ball. I mean, you can go out and get a guard or a tackle. Yeah, they're going to come in and play, and but is it going to really help you win a bunch of games? And here's the challenging thing about the portal, James, is you don't know anything. You don't know near as much about the portal players as you know about the high school players. Now, if you're lucky enough or fortunate enough to recruit a portal player that's a young man that you recruited in high school for 2 or 3 years, and watched in games, you know his family, any incidents he had in high school. You watched him in the weight room lift weights in high school. Because most of these portal guys, you've never seen. You're watching them on Huddle. You're watching some of their college tape, and then all you're doing is calling and finding out information from that college coach, wherever that young man's left. But you don't have those relationships. They can be a good player on film, but they may not be the right people in your program, and you don't know that because you just talked to them for the first time in a week, 2 weeks. So right. I don't like that, because and I probably venture to say that most all coaches don't like that. We right. would have never, if the portal was not in place, we would never, in a college coach, say, okay, we're going to sign this kid, but you just started talking to him 3 days ago. No, you wouldn't have anything to do with that. just because they're a good player doesn't mean that they're going to turn out to be a great player for you. You don't know their personality, their background, their character, their hard work ethic. And then, a lot of times you're calling and getting information from people that are really just wanting to help the boy. So maybe they don't tell you everything about him. You know what I'm saying? So the portal's challenging, but it ain't going nowhere. It's going to happen constantly. It's going to happen every single year. You're just replacing players. The one thing about the NFL is the NFL in the free agency is at least those guys are professionals. They were already great college players to have a chance to get into that NFL. So if you go get them from a Cleveland Browns or a Miami Dolphins, at least they're professionals that you're swapping. But college is I just don't think that you're going to be getting all the great players that come in that's going to be such a difference makers unless it's a quarterback or a running back, somebody that touches the ball a bunch, or a great defensive end outside rusher. And then the NIL the NIL, the money is being fabricated. So what everybody's hearing all the time about all this money or this team's giving it's fabricated. It's fabricated. It's people are just making numbers up that it's just really not true. And to think that these teams are giving several $100,000 to multiple players, that's not happening. Everybody's saying it, but it's not really happening. But it is being talked about. Recruits do want to know about it. Parents, family members do want to know about it. And if you don't have a good NIL in place, you don't get involved. You don't get in the game. Having NIL, what it does is just get you to the table. That's it. But again, it's like I talked to you about earlier. If there's 50 great players in the country come out of high school, back in the day, they would go to about 8 or 10 teams. Everybody got those guys. Well, now those 50 great players are going to go to 30 or 40 teams. And so instead of these certain teams getting 3 or 4 guys, they may only just get 1 guy, because there's more people that are coming to the table that have some financial backgrounds and have tapped into some of their people that have graduated and went to school there, that are able to provide some money. And all that does is get you to the table. Just because you have an NIL or a collective doesn't mean that you're going to automatically, it puts you in a bidding war across the table with everybody else, and you better have a little bit better deal. Unfortunately, that's the direction we're going in. You just don't see a lot of the young men that are going to school like they did back in the day for the right reasons, for the commitment and
to win a national championship,
to win a national
graduate.
championship, to get developed. They're looking at it. Some of them, I'm not saying all of them, but there's a lot of them that are looking at it the wrong way.
Cale, this has been great. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thanks for being a part of it. And
Thank you, James.
Best of luck, man.
Love you, my friend.
Love you too, man. And I'm rooting for you every day.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's Cale Gundy, and you're listening to CBS Sports Radio's podcast.